What's up, everyone? In this video, we're going to go over the SEO plugin in Payload CMS. Before we get started though, make sure you're subscribed to my channel and getting notifications so you never miss when I release a video about Payload CMS, Next.js, and more. If you'd like to see the code that I use in this video, there's a link to the repo in the description. Now, let's dive in. The SEO plugin makes it easy to generate the information you need to render important SEO content on your website. By default, when you add the plugin to a collection or global, a new MetaField group is added to your collection or global. You're able to extend the plugin, but you get title, description, and image by default. For example, if you want the ability to add a canonical URL to your plugin, you can do that. Any additional SEO field you want to add is possible through the SEO plugin and your own custom definitions. I prefer to generate my schema markup on the front end, but you can also define those fields in this plugin fairly easily. Beyond extending the fields in the plugin, you can define functions that automatically generate titles, descriptions, and more. This makes it even easier to create the information you or your editors need in order to get SEO information onto your website without doubling up on effort. As of the time of this recording, there are plans to support dynamic variable injection to make this even easier, but that's not currently available. To get started, you'll need to install the plugin by running npm add Payload CMS plugin SEO. After you install the plugin, make sure it's the same version as the rest of your payload dependencies. If it's not, make the adjustment and run npmi to update the version. So we'll go to our package.json and we can see Payload CMS plugin SEO is at 3.21, so we'll reduce it down to 3.18 and run npmi. Next, we'll initialize the plugin by going to our payload config file, and at the top of the config file, we're going to import SEO plugin from Payload CMS plugin SEO. Then you can either create a new plugins array or find the one you've already created and add the SEO plugin config in the array. So if you've been following along, you can see that we already have a plugins array, and so we're going to add SEO plugin there. Next, we'll open this empty object and we're going to define the collections that we want to use. So we can open up an array and we only have our posts collection that's going to need SEO information. Next, you'll want to define your uploads collection. This is where you'll select a featured image to be used in the head tag of your website for link previews on social media and more. You can do this by setting uploads collection to your upload collection, which in our case, the slug of that is media. Optionally, you can define generating functions for URL, image, title, and description. You can do that by setting generate title to a function that takes doc as an argument, and we can use an arrow function to set this to be, for example, the document title. Whatever you include here will be used when you enable generate function in your admin UI, which we'll go over in a moment. For the sake of this example, we'll also use generate description, where we can take the same argument of doc and use our plain text field that we have available to us to generate our meta description. Now that the basic config is set, let's take a look at what this does in our admin UI. First, we'll run payload generate import map. Then we can spin up our local host by running npm dev and log in. Now that we're logged in, we can go to blog posts, create a new blog post, and if we scroll down, we can see all of the SEO information added to the end of our document. So now that we see the SEO fields here, let's give this document some information, which we will just call blog 1 and use the slug blog 1. This is some example text, and then this is an example of a meta description. Then we can hit auto generate for the title and for the description, and when we publish changes, we can look at the API, and under content, we can see a new group that we did not create called meta, which includes a title and a description. What if we want this to be in a new tab though? Well, we can go back to our plugin config and add the TabbedUI option and set it to true. So TabbedUI, set that to true. When we do that and save our work, we can refresh our document, and at the top of that document, we can see the SEO information is contained within this tab instead of a group at the bottom of the page. One thing to note here though, if you want to use top level or sidebar fields, you do not want to let the default content tab get created for you. Instead, define your own tab first, then place all other fields adjacent to it. And as you can see from when we auto-generated our title and description, those persisted when we changed our UI to the tabbed UI. Looking at the preview field, we can see that our URL isn't getting generated automatically. So let's fix that by defining our generate URL option in the SEO plugin config. So under generate description, we'll add generate URL and pass in both doc and collection slug, and we can set this to be equal to our example.com, and then we'll use our collection slug and our doc slug. So we'll save this, and down here in the preview we can see that our URL has been generated. There are many other arguments you can pass into these functions like the ID, locale, and config of the collection or global, as well as the payload request object, which allows you to query other documents or make other changes. If we had our own image field in our collection, we could also use generate image to allow for one-click population of a featured image in our MetaImageField. I mentioned earlier that we can also include our own custom fields based on our needs. As an SEO, I always like having the ability to adjust the canonical as needed. So we're going to create a new custom field to allow for me to do this. Under TabbedUI, we'll add a new option called Fields. We'll still want to include the default fields, so we can pass those in and open up an arrow function that opens an empty array. When we do this, we'll use the spread operator and include default fields. Then we can add other fields like we would for any other collection or group or array field. So here we'll add name, canonical, URL, with the type of text, which will then allow us to have a new custom field in our SEO plugin config when we save our work and refresh our item. And there you can see canonical URL show up at the bottom here. This setup works great if you have a simple setup and you have no need for more configuration on a per collection basis. However, you are able to use the fields directly in your collection for more flexibility. Let's delete everything from our plugin config except for the generate functions. So we'll delete our fields, our tabbed UI, our uploads collection, and our posts. The generate functions need to stay here for us to enable the generate functions at the collection level. After our collection refreshes, we'll see that all of our work and our two tabs are gone. We can then go into our collection and wrap everything in a tab field. So we can go to our posts config, create a new field that will be type of tabs, and then we'll need to open a tabs array. So our first tab is going to be labeled content, and it's going to have fields, which are all of these fields here. So we'll just select from blocks all the way down to our users array, cut those, and paste them into our fields array here. We'll then add a new tab that we'll label SEO. Now in this case, we do want all of these fields to be grouped together. So we're going to name this one Meta, just to take the name that we had before. Now we can open up an empty fields array and get to work. At the top of our post config file, we'll import MetaDescriptionField, MetaImageField, MetaTitleField, OverviewField, and PreviewField from Payload CMS plugin SEO/fields. We can then add each of these as fields to our new SEO tab below. Let's start with the MetaTitleField. So we can type in MetaTitleField and open up that object. We can optionally configure this field with overrides, but we do have our generate function created in our payload config, so we'll at least set our hasGenerate function to true. If you wanted to override the label, for example, you can do that by using overrides. Open that up and change the label to whatever you want. So when I save this, it'll refresh and you can see that the title name has been changed to whatever you want. So obviously that's silly. We don't need that. We can just change this back to be title. We can do the same thing for our MetaDescriptionField. So we'll add MetaDescriptionField, and we have the same thing here where we can do hasGenerate function, and we can set that to true. When I save that and refresh the page, we can see that our description has reappeared. We can then move on to our MetaImageField, which needs a relation to our media, so it knows which collection to take its images from. We won't have the hasGenerate function configured for this example, but you could go back in and add it yourself using the generate image function in your SEO plugin config. If you'd like to include a preview, you can also include the PreviewField by typing in PreviewField with a hasGenerate function set to true. When we save that and refresh over here, we can now see our preview here at the bottom. Lastly, you can include an optional overview field that includes field paths to match the target fields for data. So we'll do that by adding overview field. And here we're going to define our title path, our description path, and our image path. And here we're going to access our title, description, and image meta fields like we would any other kind of object. So here we'll use meta title. Here we'll do meta.description, and lastly we'll do meta.image. So now when we save this, we can see that now 0 out of 3 checks are passing. And the checks that it's looking for are these boxes here, where it says our title is too short, our description is too short, and there's no image there for our meta image. So we will just copy and paste a couple of times until we get good, and we can see now 1 out of 3 checks are passing. We can still include custom fields here, so let's add our canonical URL back in. We'll add it underneath our MetaImageField, so we can just, like we would with any other field, we'll create a new field named canonical URL, and we'll label this canonical URL just so it looks a little bit better to the eye, and it's going to just be a text field. So we can hit save, and we'll see underneath our meta image canonical URL added back in. A good benefit here is that I can now use a before change hook to define the canonical URL for me if the value is currently blank. This essentially creates a default value for me that I can then edit if I want to change the canonical URL. So let's do that by defining a field level hook. So we can do that by adding the hooks option and opening up a pair of curly braces. And then we'll use before change and open up an array. So we'll use an async function that has data and value. And we'll say here after the arrow, if there's a value, then return value. If not, return our example.com/posts/data.slug. Doing this will prevent any changes from overwriting my custom canonical URL. So I can save this, publish our changes, and I can see now my canonical URL is currently being populated. The configuration options for the SEO plugin is endlessly flexible and extendable. I just covered a few use cases for this plugin based on my own experiences. But there's so much more you can do in your own configuration, like including schema markup and, soon, variable injection. In my next video, I'll go over how to actually render this SEO information on the front end. If you found this video helpful, please like it and share it with others who might also find it useful. Check to make sure you're subscribed to my channel and getting notifications so you never miss when I put out any content around Payload CMS, Next.js, and more. If you have suggestions or questions, please leave those in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Until then, I'll see you on the next one.